Okay. All right. So in this chapter, what we're going to see is basically we're going to see the concepts of interest. So in other words, we're going to run into the topics of simple interest. We're going to see compound interest, okay? And we're also going to see something weird that's called the APY. You'll see what that is You'll see what that is hopefully today. The whole idea here is, well, basically we're going to see, I guess, kind of an application of exponential functions. And we're also going to see, how math is used in the real world, in the world all around us, that is. That's one of the points of this class is to see how math can be used, how math is used, all around us. I don't know if you guys are on student loans or not. I know that is something that some students do, but that is something that deals with mathematics and interest, actually. Also with bank accounts, that's something else where interest comes into play. So we are going to see these two concepts here, simple interest and compound interest. Annual percentage yield actually does deal with, with percent change and relative change. So those concepts are not going away. Okay? Good. All right. So anyway, let's keep going then. So first, this is just some basic terminology. I mean, again, it's all in the textbook. I did email you the notes, just an outline note. There's going to be examples that we're going to do. I didn't put in the notes I sent you. But for instance, generally, if you're going to, let's say, a bank, right, and you decide to put money into a savings account, what's going to happen is generally that account will build interest. That is, a certain percentage of the amount in there will be taken and added on to the account. Or if you're borrowing money from a bank, let's say, or some other kind of lender, what's going to happen is they're going to charge interest. That's how they make money, lenders. They charge interest and they make money on that, which is, again, a certain percentage of the amount you're borrowing. Okay? And the initial amount, the starting amount, that is what we call the principal. So you'll see in examples today as well. But again, if you're depositing money into a savings account, right? And after some time, what will happen is a certain percentage of that, say 7%, will be calculated and added on to the account. The initial amount in there is called the principal. And then there's also this concept of interest. Well, I kind of said what that is. It's basically a percentage of the principal. Or generally, it could be as you'll see, it's just a percentage of the balance in the account. That's generally what the interest is. So it's a certain percentage of the amount in there. And then there's this thing called APR, which is the annual percentage rate. It's essentially how much interest will be paid or added on to the account in a year. Basically, for us, the APR is going to be our percent that we're going to be dealing with, like 7%, 10%, that kind of thing. That's what our APR is going to be. But it's annual. That is actually important, okay? Especially when we get to what's called, well, you'll see what I mean. I don't want to get too much away. So this is just some terminology I thought that for us to have, okay? It's in the book as well, so, okay. Next. So this is the concept of simple interest. I did put this here in bold, or maybe not bold, but I put it up here. But the idea with simple interest is, let's say you're putting money in, well, you'll see some examples, but we're putting money in an account, right? What happens is a certain percentage is calculated, right? That's what the interest is. Basically, with simple interest, the same amount of interest is added on during each time period. I mean, we'll do an example shortly, but with simple interest, the idea is that the same amount of interest is calculated, is added on each time or taken away, as opposed to something like compound interest, where interest is constantly be calculated, and since the balance will change, the amount of interest will change. But you'll see through an example that simple interest is basically you just keep adding on the same amount. The interest is constant during each time period. And that interest is capital I. P naught, P sub 0 that is the principal, the starting amount. R is our APR, which is basically for us our percentage written as a decimal. T is the number of years we're leaving the money in the account. And again, I is basically the total interest you're going to pay. And then, of course, the balance after this time period, okay? That's what this is. P sub 0 plus I. You know, it's the amount that's in there, but then you add on the interest. Okay. And again, this is in the notes I sent you, so, you know, you don't have to write this down. It's in the book. So that's what's simple interest, but this is basically this is our notation. And let's do an example just to illustrate that. So let's say you're borrowing money from a friend. And I don't know if you decide to do this in writing or what, but for whatever reason, you decide to pay it back to your friend at 5% simple interest for 3 years. So I made a little table, I guess, so to say. I think I actually might have made it with Excel, Microsoft Excel. You can also use Google Sheets. They're actually very useful. So at the beginning, during year 1, right, you borrow the $1,000. So the starting balance, in this case of the loan, is $1,000. Okay? To get the interest, right, it's 5%. So you're going to take 5% of $1,000. You're going to add that on. Then your ending balance is $1,050. That's after 1 year. So that's how much you owe. And that's also your starting balance for year 2. Then, since this is simple interest, the amount of interest is not changing. You're not calculating, in other words, 5% of this new balance. You're not doing that. Simple interest, the interest amount, as you can see, doesn't change. So here you end up paying $50, and so the interest that's earned is $50 again. The ending balance at the end of year 2 is $1,100. And so that's the starting balance. In year 3, the interest earned is $50 again. That doesn't change. And this is the ending balance. So not only do you pay back your friend $1,000, you pay an extra $150. That's your interest. That's the interest that's earned, that your friend earns from lending out money. Okay, now we could do this, you know, really for any example, but let's use the formulas. You know, the formulas from here. We're going to use these formulas. So P sub 0, that's our starting balance, right? That's $1,000. I said that it's 5%. That's our APR. Okay, so we're going to write that as a decimal. The total interest earned, so I had to go back and forth like this. This is what capital I is. That's your total interest. It's 0.05 times 1,000, right? But again, it's the same for each of the 3 years. So we're multiplying it by 3. And our total interest is $150. Okay. Then to get the balance at the end of 3 years, you know how much you owe in this case since you're borrowing money, you could do P sub 0 plus the total interest. But mathematically, although I show it here as well, P sub 0 times 1 plus R times T, it's the same as this. It's 1,000 times 1 plus this. I mean, it's mathematically, it's the same thing as the starting balance, your principal, and you're adding on the interest, which is $1,150. Okay? So again, you pay your friend back and you pay your friend an extra $150. You know, that's how loans, that's how, banks and people who lend out money, that's how they make money. They make money off the interest. Okay. So for us, that's one example. Okay, so that's one example for us. Okay, so that's an example of simple interest. You'll see shortly with compound interest that the interest is actually going to change each year. You restart the, the recording.